Major Garrett. Major, welcome back to Brian and the Judge.
Brian and the Judge, it is great to be with you. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you, our good friend. You've had a very, very busy week, as all of your weeks seem to be. Did the President of the United States intentionally not call on you the other night?
Yes. That was retribution for the Fox network, broadcast network, running with its regularly scheduled programming instead of taking the White House press conference.
How do you know?
Wow. That's
because
outrageous.
I was warned that it might be considered as part of the overall consideration as to whether or not I'd be called on. I wasn't, and I can add 1 and 1 to make 2.
And can you tell me what your question was?
Sure. My question was going to be on the Guantanamo Bay detainees. I was going to cite a Wall Street Journal NBC poll saying that 50% of the country opposes the decision to close Guantanamo, and I said let's discuss 3 things that have come up recently. In Europe, there's speculation to increase the amount of countries willing to take detainees. Remember, only one country, France, has agreed to take 1 detainee. The United States is going to have to pay some sort of resettlement money to the European countries for them to take these detainees. I was going to ask the President, will you do that? I was also going to ask him that his National Intelligence Director, Dennis Blair, has said any detainees released in the United States will instantly need public assistance to help them acclimate to their life in America. Will you pay public assistance to detainees released in the country? And lastly, I was going to ask, the Amnesty International has said any detainee at Guantanamo, wrongly held or mistreated, deserves reparations. Will you pay them? I think
Great
yes,
question.
no, or maybe on any of those 3 would have gotten a big headline.
And
Those are profound questions. He's probably just as glad Fox didn't run the show, the presser, so he didn't have to answer that.
And the thing is, if you put enchanted somewhere in the question, you might have gotten called on.
You never know.
That is not a major Garrett
everyone knows,
word.
those are all huge issues, completely separate from the security issues, which the White House has its elaborate talking points about security. Well, we'll deal with the local authorities. We'll make sure everyone is safe. Of course, any government's going to say that, but no one has really focused on these other issues. Are taxpayers of this country going to have to pay either to take detainees to Europe, keep them here, or, if this was a violation of international law, pay reparations under some international dictate?
I think the answer is probably yes to all that, as odious as it may be.
Right, and those things the President hasn't said, and that's what I would have tried to get out of him.
Barack Obama of now, after 100 days, he did not get the ratings at that presser that he did the first time. Do you think the administration will get the message that possibly we're wearing out our primetime welcome?
I think it's under serious consideration. Look, they calculated that the 100 days were going to be a time to maximize their exposure and maximize the deliverability of their message. They knew that at some point the audience would grow a little tired of this particular form of presentation. But you play that out as long as you possibly can, and still nearly 29 million isn't bad. I mean, for an hour's time to get to convey your message the way you want to in that setting, still pretty good. But I think the more important factor is that the other networks are going to look at the declined public interest, the decline of news value of these events, and say, wait a minute, are we becoming a news organization, or are we just becoming a megaphone for the White House who's trying to use the perceived popularity of the president and look-in audience? Well, when the look-in audience drops by 20 million in the course of 100 days, or even less than 100 days, then you have a news decision to make, and I wouldn't be surprised if some of the other networks peel off following Fox's lead.
Here's my take on his statement yesterday, and I'd love to hear yours. I think he was seething, the president, and furious that they couldn't put together a deal to keep Chrysler out of bankruptcy. And once Chrysler had its lawyers here in New York file for bankruptcy, he decided to demonize the last group, the group of bondholders who said, we're not going to take the haircut you want because under the law we're entitled to more money. I am outraged that a president would put his thumb on the scale in a case that's before a federal judge in another branch of the government and try and affect the outcome of that case by demonizing one of the litigants. How do you see it?
Judge, I was amazed by what I heard from the president yesterday. It was inconsistent with my general take on his temperament, having covered him for 14 months on the campaign trail and the first 102 days here at the White House. It is not consistent with the law. As someone who taught and reveres his having taught the Constitution, it makes no legal sense whatsoever. I mean, first and foremost, the White House said yesterday, this bankruptcy week, we hope to convince a judge that this bankruptcy can be handled in 30 and 60 days. That's already prejudging.
Right.
Because
it's also
if you prejudge
impossible.
the speed, you prejudge the outcome in certain respects. And any litigant will tell you that. And secondarily, to publicly use his bully pulpit to say these folks over here who have standing and legal rights have done something wrong, I found to be amazing. And I asked Robert Gibbs at the briefing yesterday, I said, I'm trying to understand the president's anger. I said, is he angry at the bondholders for asserting their rights? He goes, no, the anger has nothing to do with their rights. They still have rights. He just thinks they should have taken the deal. Well, how was he able to persuade the other debt holders to take the deal? Well, all the other debt holders, Judge and Brian, are TARP recipients.
Yep.
And if you think
it's called
that's
leverage.
a coincidence, maybe it is, but I don't think it is. The bondholders who didn't take the debt deal, who wanted 40 cents on the dollar instead of 30 cents, so don't assume that they were not willing to take any haircut. They're willing to take a substantial haircut. But they decided, on the basis of their fiduciary responsibility to their investors
and their understanding of the law.
They will take their chances in bankruptcy court, which they are fully entitled to do. As a matter of fact, the law protects their right to do that. And I have a very good source in town who watches the auto industry very closely, all three, and he said, look, Ford is in a very good position because it hasn't taken any of this money. It's perceived as the stronger of the companies, but its great fear, as it holds on to its independence in all this, is that the government won't put the thumb on the scale for Chrysler and GM because they're in the mix with the government. So you have an independent company that's not taking government money, and its great fear is not about its ability to compete. Its great fear is its ability to compete against the government.
When the president said, I don't want to get in the car business and the banking business, does he look sincere when he said it? Do his actions reflect that?
Well, let's just take a look at Chrysler. The United States government, if this bankruptcy is completed, will own 8% of the new Chrysler. Canada will own 2%, Fiat will own 20%, the UAW will own 55%. The U.S. government is going to give Fiat more percentages of that company, up to 35%, if it sends Jeeps and Chrysler products to Latin America and to Europe. So that's the government making a decision based on what Fiat can get of the company. Then if Fiat brings its fuel-efficient engine technology to Chrysler factories, they get another 5%. So that's another dictate from the United States government. And when they produce a 40-mile-per-gallon vehicle under the Chrysler brand name, they get another 5% of the company. All right, so that's three decisions that Fiat has to make in order to enlarge its stake in a company that it is partnering with. It only stays at 20% now, and if it doesn't make those three decisions that government dictates, that's where it stays. So it only enlarges its share when it does what the government tells them to do. I'm sorry, that seems to me like the government's in the auto business.
It sure is.
It does.
Private ownership, government control.
And
they used to call it fascism.
There'll be a new 6-member board of this new company. 4 members will be picked by the federal government.
Wow. Major Garrett, it's always a pleasure. We really appreciate you stopping by, especially in the last minute like this. You're such a wealth of information about all these things.
Always a pleasure, guys.
Talk Radio Stimulus Package. Kilmeade and Napolitano are on.